Hello YouTube, welcome to the channel of Vortigaunt Gaming. Let's run some Mythic Plus dungeons in World of Warcraft. Today we will be watching back an Everbloom level 21 that I ran as an Arcane Mage. The weekly affixes are Fortified, Entangling, and Bolstering. I will be doing my best to give an overtalk of the dungeon run. If you're into that kind of content, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. So I've been looking forward to running this dungeon. For this week specifically, this seems to be a pretty easy week in terms of the affixes, and on top of that, it is a fortified week. And in my experience over the course of the season, this dungeon has been pretty hard to do in tyrannical weeks. Some of the bosses here feel, I would say, a bit overpowered for, their corresponding Mythic Plus dungeon level. That being said, since this is a fortified week, the lust profile is going to look a little bit different, I feel like. And, well, the bosses won't be as bad, and most of the trash mobs, other than maybe a few pulls here and there, aren't going to be too big of a deal, I feel like. You may have seen that we popped Lust on the first pull of the dungeon, and so that way we'll have Lust ready to go by the time we get around to boss 2. We don't really need Lust for boss number 1, I feel like, since there is a part in boss number 1 where you do automatically kind of get extra damage dealt to the boss, or at least the boss takes more damage from the spells that you hit it with. So, we don't have to worry about lusting there, since we effectively kind of have something that functions a bit like it, right? But for this part, the main thing to worry about here is we want to take out the Naturalists first. The Naturalists are the one that cast the Choking Vines. We want to make sure that we kick the Choking Vines cast so no one gets stunned for, I think it's like 10 seconds. It's a pretty long cast time, and also, or it's a pretty long stun, I should say, and also it does damage over time, so you will be losing health while you're stunned. The other thing to worry about of the trash pulls this week is the Bolstering affix, which, well, if one ad dies, or one enemy of trash dies, I should say, it will buff all the other trash that's still left alive. It'll give them a buff for, I think it's like 15 to 20 seconds, and they'll do way more damage to you while they have that buff on. And you will see this might be a problem a bit later in the dungeon. I would say before boss number 2, there are some ads, or there's some trash mobs in that section where you don't want them to be bolstered up too much, or they could maybe cause some issues for your team down there. But we'll worry about that once we get there. For right now, we're just going to focus on kicking these Naturalist casters, and kicking them out of Choking Vines specifically. Mages have Counterspell. Counterspell is basically their version of the kick, and you can use Counterspell on the Choking Vines cast. Luckily, for the Naturalists, you can also stun them using Dragon's Breath. And also the knockback, it's called Blast Wave, I just saw myself hovering over it. But Blast Wave is a knockback, and I believe that also knocks back the Naturalists, so you can stun the Naturalists out of their cast by doing that.
We have not yet.
It would be best if you don't double up any of your interrupts or your stuns with your teammates, so that way you have enough stuns to take care of whatever cast you need to when they happen. But you'll also see that this tank is going... I wouldn't say they're going too quickly. They are going fairly quickly. It is a 21, and you're going to see some things they do here to kind of maximize the amount, or to optimize the amount of time spent. Because the thing is, you don't want to maximize the amount of time you spend in here. You want to minimize, since, the idea of running Mythic Plus is to do it as fast as you can, right? But yeah, they are going to kind of optimize their routing and their pulls. But they aren't going to go too overboard with it. They're going to go at a steady enough pace that everyone can kind of... manage everything properly, right? So after this trash pull, we're pretty much almost about to have Lust up. I'm actually using the talent that allows me to give myself personalized Lust, even though I have the Lust debuff on myself, and it's still got like 5 or 6 minutes to go on that. but I'm looking to pop it on this boss right here. Normally the hope is that the tank runs through the first part of the dungeon quick enough that I'm going to have enough time on the Lust debuff, and I'll have Lust back up for myself so that we can use it on this boss and not have to worry about whether or not I'll have it ready for the next boss. I'm not sure why the boss targeted me for a few seconds there at the beginning of the pull, but it's alright. The tank actually got, you know, the boss's aggro back on him, and also you'll see that before this pull, the tank actually went a bit further into the dungeon to pull trash mobs a bit later in the dungeon, right outside this boss room, right onto the boss, so we could take care of the trash percentage while dealing with the boss. So the boss is going into phase 2 of the fight right now, where he basically stands still, a bunch of water floats to him, and we get some extra damage. He takes extra damage. You'll see that there's a debuff on him that makes the amount of damage he takes, I think it's like 200%. So I usually try to line up my Lust usage with this phase 2, so that way I can benefit from the extra damage that the boss is taking, as well as the extra damage that my Lust is providing to myself. And then we try to, we see to it that this phase lasts as long as we can make it last, which means dropping these vines in front of the floating balls of water so that the balls of water run into the vines and don't hit the boss. I think we're running out of vines, so the boss is going to come out of phase 2 pretty soon. I think the next 2 floating balls of water are going to do it, and then we're going to go back into phase 1. But phase 1 is pretty easy. Just don't get hit by the swirlies on the ground and drop vines around the boss so that they're ready to go soak up the floating balls of water the next time we go into phase 2. I don't think we end up going into phase 2 during this run again, though. I think we're going to burn him down before we get back to phase 2. Or if he does get back to phase 2, he'll be in it for like maybe 1 or 2 seconds and he'll just die anyway since he's at such low health. But anyway, that's pretty much this whole boss fight. It looks like the boss is going to go down in a little bit. He's got maybe like 2 or 3 seconds before he goes back into phase 2. But you know, we're not going to worry about our cooldown usage since the boss is pretty much about to go down right here. We'll just worry about giving ourselves a slash cheer and moving on to the next part of the dungeon.
Farewell, friend of the
So normally there would be trash mobs right here to the right and left of me as we walk through this hallway right here, but those are the trash mobs that the tank pulled onto boss 1 so that we could cleave them down during the boss fight. So with that, we can actually head on over to the next part of the dungeon, which is this hallway right here. There's some ads to watch out for, specifically the Twisted Abomination here. I'll talk about in this a bit. The Berserkers, however, I think from how I've seen them behave, I think they leap onto the player that's standing the furthest from them. So you can see me right here trying to move myself kind of nearer to the Berserkers so they jump on me. Unluckily, that means they do jump on the healer, and so the healer does go down right here, right? But that's fine, since the respawn point is pretty much like right over there. You see that the healer is already back and healing everyone and doing their job. So it's not too big of a deal that the healer died right there. But that leaping mechanic is something to watch out for when dealing with the Berserkers. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the Abomination, since this is a bolstering week. If you're pulling like a pack of trash that has an Abomination in it, and the other enemies in that pack of trash die before the Abomination, that Abomination is going to be buffed a little bit, and that's going to be a problem when the Abomination casts their explosion attack. I believe it's called like Noxious Explosion or something. You'll see it actually just happen right there, put a debuff on everyone. First it does AoE damage to the whole group, and then it puts a debuff that does damage over time for I think like 5 or so seconds. And if that abomination is bolstered, the amount of damage coming from that explosion is way higher. You'll see that I just used Altered Time right there. I was outlooking that the explosion would come out and do massive amounts of damage since the abomination was bolstered. So I timed it so that after the explosion came out, hopefully I would still be alive and that I'd hit Altered Time again to pop right back to full health. And that would kind of help the healer deal with healing everyone through that damage over time that happens afterward. Anyway, that abomination has been taken care of. This pull right here isn't too big of a deal. In fact, we were able to burn these trash packs down right here pretty quickly. I believe this pack has 2 berserkers in it, but there's nothing that's too big of a deal in this pack, I don't think. Hopefully someone doesn't die during this pull and prove what I just said wrong. I don't think anyone died during this pull though, if I remember correctly. So you may have noticed, you may have seen at this point in time that the Time Warp debuff has fallen off our team, so Time Warp is available, and also my actual spell, Time Warp, is off cooldown, so I can pop it whenever. We are going to save it for boss number 2 though, since that's what the tank called for. And boss number 2 is coming up in about, I think, like 3 or 4 minutes from now. But you'll see at this point the tank is kind of taking it easy with the pulls, only pulling maybe 1 pack at a time, so we don't have to worry about too much damage coming out from these adds at this point. And that makes this part of the dungeon a whole lot easier, especially on a fortified week. This is one way to make this part of the dungeon easier with the trash pulls. There is one pretty hard pull that's coming up later in the dungeon. There's pretty much no way to avoid it. But we'll worry about that when we get there. I'm not sure how the monk died there. That was kind of weird, but it's fine. That means there are only 4 people getting hit by that explosion right there. So it means the healer doesn't have to worry too much about healing the team after getting hit by the explosion. Also, there aren't any adds to bolster this guy, so the explosion isn't going to hurt as hard as it did earlier in the dungeon run, where I used Altered Time to kind of mitigate the damage from it. Alright, so Monk is back. Also remember to reapply buffs to people. So we're going to go ahead and reapply Arcane Intellect. And then I think this looks like the last pull before the next boss, right? So I'm not going to burn my cooldowns. I'm going to try to save my cooldowns for the start of the next boss fight. Cooldowns, like the cooldowns that I'm talking about, pretty important part of the Arcane Mage rotation. If you don't know what the Arcane Mage rotation is, like on a structural level, it's pretty simple. On like a framework level, you have 2 phases. You have the burn phase and you have the conserve phase. The burn phase is you cast Radiant Spark on a target. Then you cast 5 spells on the target, one of them being a barrage, and as the barrage is traveling toward the target, you hit Touch of the Magi. And the idea is that Radiant Spark and Touch of the Magi both give you burn windows to do as much damage as you can to the target. And once Touch of the Magi wears off, you go into the Conserve phase, which is basically use your spells in such a way that you have enough mana for the next burn phase. If you want more details, there are enough guides on YouTube that you can look up. The important thing, even at mythic dungeons above a level 20, is to just do the mechanics properly and not die. Speaking of mechanics, the main mechanic that the tank was talking about a couple seconds ago when he asked if I can take care of Revitalized on Gola, you'll see that Gola is that, it's that boss that's standing over to the left right there. And once Gola switches into the form where they start casting actual spells, they have a spell called Revitalize, which I just kicked right there. It turns out that actually mages can spell steal Revitalize if the cast does go off. Basically, Revitalize makes the other boss, which we just took down a couple seconds ago, it makes them generate health back, I think at like 10 to 15% health per second or something, and you could actually spell steal it as a mage. That being said, it's usually a whole lot easier to just kick it before it goes off, so you don't have to worry about the other boss healing up too much, especially if you're running this dungeon on a tyrannical week. So since that other boss is down, or the boss on the right was taken out, this boss fight gets a little bit easier, since we don't really have to worry about the revitalized cast coming out of Gola anymore, I don't think. The only thing we really have to worry about is kicking Water Bolt, so no one gets chunked out of their health too much, and also dodge the green swirlies on the ground. And then other than that, it's basically just pump as much damage into these bosses as you can and take them out quickly so you can move on and head on to the next part of the dungeon. Which is what we're about to do here. It looks like this boss is going to go down in the next few seconds. We also want to make sure that we're hitting Shifting Power. Shifting Power is an ability that I have in my talent tree that lowers the remaining time on my cooldowns, so they come back online quicker. Anyway, that's going to be boss number 2 down, so we'll give ourselves a slash cheer and move on to the next part of the dungeon. Oh yeah, so I think I start lagging here a bit, and I think I die from the lag in one of these pulls up here. Kind of like the Paladin there. Actually, I don't know if the Paladin died from the lag, but yeah, having the Paladin not be here is kind of not great, since the respawn point is back at the beginning of the dungeon, and you can see we're pretty far from there, so the Paladin has to run all the way back here from there. I think the Paladin does have like that horse ability that he can pop, and also I'm pretty sure we can mount up in this dungeon anyway, so he can just mount up and run back, so it's not too bad. Also, if he has the yak mount, he can repair as well. Yeah, so he's mounted. In this part of the dungeon, you do want to focus the spellcasters. So the one we just killed there was the Frost Mage, right? The Frost Mage I don't think is too bad. This no, we haven't pulled the there it is. We pulled the Pyro, the Fire Mage here. Pyro Blast is pretty it does chunk you out from a bit of health. This Cinder, I think the Cinder Light Salvo, that does damage to the whole group, but it does it like one at a time. So I have an ability called Mass Barrier, which is basically a shield that I can put on everyone, so it can mitigate some of the damage coming out from the the Fire Mage right there. So for this one, we got an Arcane Mage, and his special abilities, he sends an Arcane Orb out to some player. Usually, I think it's the furthest player standing from him. And so right here, I'm trying to bait that orb out from him. You'll see that I get soon I get like a ring for the Entangling Affix around me. I'm not going to move out of this ring yet. I'm going to wait for the Arcane Orb to be baited, and then I'll blink out of it so I can take care of 2 mechanics at the same time. Alright, so we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left on the Time Warp debuff, but my Time Warp ability is off cooldown, so I can actually pop it here on this pull, and this is kind of I would say in my opinion, this is the hardest pull of this dungeon right here. And so this is a good time to pop Bloodlust on myself right here, so we can take care of these. We can take care of this trash pack quicker. And this is a Fortified week, so this is kind of the. I would say this is the most difficult week, at least when it comes to whether or not you're running on Fortified Tyrannical, to deal with this trash pull. Alright, we still need to try to bait the Arcane Orb out of the Arcane Mage. And yeah, I lag really bad here, get hit by the Arcane Orb. And I die from it. I think it hit me for like 1,000,000. I checked the damage meter right here. Okay, so it wasn't quite 1,000,000, but I did... It pretty much one-shots you at this level. Anyway, I didn't hit Release Spirit since I figured they were going to kill these ads fairly quickly, and it would just be quicker for me to get revived right here. Sit down, eat some food. Tank's actually going to pull before I finish eating, but that's mostly fine since this boss fight doesn't have any kind of wall or door that closes off the boss room. The only thing you do have to worry about is that the the fire swirlies don't hit you while you're still sitting. Also, I lagged right there, so that's why I misaimed that arcane orb right there, but that's alright. Anyway, we're also going to blink out of this vine right there after the mechanics start, so I can dodge kind of two mechanics at the same time, sidestep both of them. And so you might see a debuff on this boss where it's like a it shows like a shield icon, and that shield icon is based on the specialization, like the Mage Spec that the boss is transforming into. So the current shield icon is Arcane, which means she just swapped. She just kind of brought in an Arcane ability. And now it's swapped to Fire, which means she's brought in, you know, this Fire ability right here. And basically you're going to be dealing with abilities from two different specs. So that time it was Fire and Arcane, so it was important for me to stand a bit far from the boss to bait that Arcane orb out. The next round of abilities is going to be Fire and Frost, so basically dodge the swirlies here and you know, don't stand in the fire. That should be good. And if we go to the next phase, it's going to go back to Frost and Arcane, which means baiting the Arcane orb and also sidestepping the ice swirlies on the ground. And I think this is going to be the last round of abilities we have to deal with, since this boss is going to go down pretty quickly. And we're actually going to go ahead and give ourselves a slash cheer and move on to the last part of the dungeon. Also repair our gear, since we did die earlier, so we did take a hit to our gear. And at this point there is actually a little bit of roleplay where someone runs there further along the path and burns them down, so we can go into the last boss room. So there is a bit that we do have to wait for. However, you also will see that we're not at 100% on our trash count yet. So we're going to spend that time that we're waiting for the roleplay to play out to clear this trash mob. And so that way, when we're done with this trash mob here, you'll see that the door to the last boss room is open. And so we can walk right in without having to wait for anything else. And as we go in, you see that the Time Warp debuff that's on us has, I think it's less than a minute, or about a minute to go. And so sometime during this fight we are going to pop Bloodlust again on the whole group. I'm waiting for the debuff to fall off, basically. This is a Fortified week, so this boss fight, in my opinion, is way worse on Tyrannical. In Fortified week, it's not that bad. Basically, the main thing here is don't die from that AoE slam that he does, and also kill this ad pretty quickly, because this ad does AoE damage. We do have Mass Barrier to mitigate some of the AoE damage, so I pop Mass Barrier right here to mitigate some of the damage from that slam, and make it a little bit easier for the healer to do their job. Now we get into the other kind of big mechanic here, is we want to squash these plants before they pop up. Since if we don't squash the plants before the Genesis cast ends, then the plants will pop up, and those are more ads that we have to take care of. Either way, it looks like we're almost ready to pop Bloodlust here. So I'm looking for that debuff to fall off. Debuff's fallen off. We're going to go ahead and pop it. And I'm not going into a burn right away. I want to wait for the ad to come out, since I think we have more than enough damage to deal with this ad within a reasonable time frame. So I feel like, you know, burning my cooldowns on the ad is a bit of a waste. I'd rather burn them on the boss, for example, right here. And then while we're doing the rotation, I can actually kind of run around and squash at least a few of these plants right here, so that they don't respawn. And then once the burn is done, we'll go ahead and hit Shifting Power to get some of our cooldowns back, although I don't know how needed that's going to be, since this boss is almost down. We might not even have time. Actually, I think we do have time for maybe one more burn. And the boss is low enough that, you know, I thought about switching to the ad to finish the ad down, but But I thought, you know what, we'll just burn the boss down because this is going to about do it here for Everbloom level 21. So we'll give ourselves a slash cheer, thank everyone for a clean run and even, congratulate them for 2-starring the dungeon. And as always, we are an Arcane Mage, so we'll do a kindness and give everyone a portal to the main hub of the expansion. And that's going to about do it for this run, so if you liked what you saw here, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to see me run any other dungeons in Dragonflight Mythic Plus Season 3, let me know in a comment down below which dungeon you'd like to see me run, and I'll do my best to film a playthrough of it. Anyway, that's going to about do it for me here, so I hope you all had fun watching, and I will see you all later.